1932. We lived in a place called Pelham Manor, New York. I am one of three children, three boys. I'm the middle boy, an older brother and a younger brother. My father was a policeman, and my mother actually was a real estate broker.
During the 60s, my grandpa got married to my grandma and had 4 out of his 7 kids during that time. My grandpa also was a Marine. He fought in the Korean War, and his brother Tommy fought in the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War took place in the years 1955 through 1975. In this war, the U.S. was trying to fight communism. North Vietnam was communist, and Southern Vietnam was not.
The United States was concerned, they call it the domino theory. I think John Foster Dulles was Secretary of State. His concern was when North Vietnam started to make inroads by sending Viet Cong in to South Vietnam, that South Vietnam would go communist.
Mm-hmm.
And that went communist, then all of Indochina would go communist.
Yeah.
And so the idea was to support South Vietnam in order to prevent the spread of communism coming down from Russia.
My grandpa's brother Tommy was in this war and was a combat engineer in charge of 250 Marines.
Having been in the Marine Corps, I was not in the Marine Corps then, but my younger brother had followed me into the Marine Corps, and he fought in the Vietnam War in the Marine Corps. He was there for the Tet Offensive.
The Tet Offensive was a series of attacks led by Northern Vietnam on Southern Vietnam. Over 100 cities in South Vietnam were attacked, and Tommy, my grandpa's brother, was there during those attacks.
That engineer, he was prepared. He said what he did was he took his bulldozers and he cleared out 500 yards of jungle around his position. He then took the backhoes and made World War I type trenches. And he had drills like fire drills. He'd blow a whistle and every Marine would go to their assigned spot. He had flares. He said, Jimmy, we had so many flares that we could put up or call in that it could get night for a month and not get dark.
Tommy not only got all of his Marines out without a scratch, he was also awarded the Bronze Star for his amazing defense position.
He said, hey, you know, this is a North Vietnamese army.
Yeah.
They had Russian weapons, they had Chinese weapons, they had boots, they had dog tags. And anyway, it's debatable as to who won the war or who lost the war. It's arguable either way. It's a shame that so many Americans will knee-jerk into the position that we lost the war. Because having been there, we never lost a battle. Mm-hmm. If anything, we lost the support of the people of America who just got tired of the war.
Although my grandpa didn't go to Vietnam, he had a first-hand experience when it came to experiencing the war back home in the U.S.
There were some people who would spit on servicemen with uniforms on when they see them in the airport. They were so thought that hey, fighting in Vietnam was so bad, and it's really a shame that some people, instead of looking at both sides of a question, will say, hey, pluses and minuses, but to go after the servicemen.
Throughout the time of the war, there were many protests going on, especially on college campuses, to stop the Vietnam War. The U.S. citizens first off didn't like the draft, but thought that we were sending soldiers in to get killed. They didn't want to send any more troops and protested against the war. Over 38% of soldiers in the Vietnam War were drafted, and over 30% of the deaths in the Vietnam War were made up of those who were drafted. Most drafted in the Vietnam War were very poor and couldn't afford to get out of the draft in any way. This caused many riots and protests because people thought that this war was a lost cause and a waste of time. Although soldiers were being mistreated, my grandpa liked to point out the change the U.S. has experienced in the past 40 years and how we have grown as a country.
What was happening in airports after the Vietnam War with people spitting on service persons and what's happening now. I don't know where this custom came from, but I think it's so terrific that Americans today, when they see somebody in uniform, are saying thank you for your service.
Yeah.
That's such a wonderful thing to do.
Mhm.
It's a wonderful thing for the younger kids to see older people doing that.
Yeah.
And it's great for the service persons. It's great for them when they walk through, the people, offering to get them a better seat on the
Yeah.
plane and things like that. So,
Overall, the 60s was a time period of many important events, and one of them being the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War not only affected the soldiers who fought, like my grandpa's brother Tommy, but the families and citizens back home. We as a country have grown so much from the 60s, but the 60s will always be remembered as a decade of many great events which has shaped the U.S. today.
well, I'm 83 years old. A lot of people are older than I am, and I have been lucky to live through this period of change. And I think that again, you say American, anytime you talk in general statements, who won the war in Vietnam?
Yeah.
Who lost the war in Vietnam? Yeah, if you're a thinking person, you'll sit back and say, let's look at both sides of this and see where we ended up.
Yeah.
But the 60s certainly were a time of turbulence and a time of strife. And of course, that, a decade when your dad was born.